surrounding the city. It would be a major engineering challenge, as Miami is built on porous ground that allows seawater to seep through. Alternatively, if Miami was flooded, the city would eventually have to be abandoned.
There are cities you can save and cities that you can't save, and the choices will be based on, can we dike it off, can we put it off, or is this too expensive, not worth the price, not worth the effort.
One city that is determined to defend itself against the sea is New Orleans on the Louisiana coast. During Hurricane Katrina in 2005, large parts of New Orleans were flooded after a storm surge raised sea levels by 20 feet. The city lies several feet below sea level. Its antiquated locks and levees weren't strong enough to hold back the rising sea. As the storm pushed the surging waters of the Gulf into Lake Borgne and onwards into the city's canals, New Orleans sea defenses broke in up to 50 places.
We had some levee and flood wall failures in the hurricane system, and the combination of that overtopping of the levees and the flood walls that failed caused massive flooding throughout the city. About 80% of the city of New Orleans was flooded following Hurricane Katrina.
It took weeks before the floodwater was pumped out and residents began to return. Among them, Victory Wallace Taylor and her son Peter, who returned home to a badly damaged house.
The flood was very bad. They wouldn't let us come and see about our house. It damaged my heart a little bit because I'm afraid for the flood. Like if a flood come in again, I don't know what to do because I think I might panic this time. I don't know. It is a hard pill to swallow, you see.
To help prevent New Orleans from flooding again in the future, the US government is investing billions of dollars in the city's sea defenses. Along the riverbanks, the US Army Corps of Engineers is strengthening New Orleans' levees and locks. The work that's being done here gives a taste of the kind of constructions that may be needed later this century to protect coastal cities around the world against rising sea levels.
We learned a lot of key lessons, and some of the key lessons learned were incorporated into the designs for the Greater New Orleans Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System. And that system is a series of many different aspects. It has flood walls, it has pump stations, it has levees. There's the series that we call the multiple lines of defense.
The defense of New Orleans includes a novel approach, to take the fight against the rising water all the way to the enemy. The flood surge that broke New Orleans' sea defenses approached the city from Lake Borgne, a lagoon to the east of New Orleans. It is here that the US Army Corps of Engineers is focusing its efforts.
What we've done now is we moved the defense of the city out. We're about 12 miles from downtown, about 8 miles away from the 9th Ward, which is flooded. What we've done is we moved the protection from downtown, the heart of the city, left it in there, improved it. We've moved all the way out here, 8 miles out to the edge of Lake Borgne, where we now have this brand new structure which works as a primary line of defense.
To build these impressive sea defenses in 2 years' time, the US Army Corps of Engineers has brought in some of its top people with engineering experience from around the world.
I've 29 years military service in the Army Reserve. I've had 8 combat tours, 19 deployments. I've served in Bosnia, Macedonia, Kosovo, Kuwait twice, and Iraq 3 times. They sent me here after that to help rebuild the city.
One day, sea defenses like this may have to be built around the world to hold back the rising oceans. Every coastal city will have its specific problems. In the case of New Orleans, it's million-year-old mud.
New Orleans is made up of the best topsoil from the United States that came down the Mississippi River and built up down here. However, back in graduate school, the whole idea was that the better it is to grow something on, the worse it is to build on. Well, this is the topsoil of the nation down here, so it's the worst possible stuff to build in. What you see behind me is the Hawken. It is a pile-driving crane brought in from Seattle, Washington, across the Pacific Ocean, down to the Panama Canal to New Orleans to build this particular gate and the barge gate. And what we've had to do is go down 60 feet through the newer material down to the old Pleistocene clay, and that is our basis. So the main wall itself goes down to minus 130 feet, and the batter piles that brace it are down to 190 feet. All tall buildings in New Orleans, the dome, everything is based upon piles.
As well as holding back the sea, the new seawall has to allow ships to pass through. Dry cofferdams are put in place to construct special barge and sector gates. The concrete is poured, the dams are flooded, and the gates can be completed. All told, New Orleans' new sea defenses are costing the taxpayer a hefty $15 billion. But their design only takes into account storm surges that build up from current sea levels. If sea levels rose by 6 feet, any storm surge would be higher as well, and the city's sea defenses would have to be heightened at an even greater cost. Not every country can afford to spend billions on sea defenses. Bangladesh is a country of 150 million people. Many live at or just above sea level. Just 3 feet of sea level rise will have a devastating effect on the country's population.
Turns out the area of the world that would be most vulnerable to sea level rise would be Asia. The rice-growing river deltas in Asia that are very close to sea level, even a modest 3-foot rise, would put half the rice land in Bangladesh underwater.
Bangladesh has over 100 to 120 million people, and that number is rising fast. A great deal of its land just simply gets covered by water. And again, once you have salt water coming up, it's not just the land that's covered, it's the intrusion of salt. Even a 3-foot sea level rise wipes out half its rice crop. Their population's going up a third, and their land is being shrunk by a third. You know, you do the math. It's a catastrophe coming at us.
Much of Bangladesh is a vast muddy delta that cannot be defended. 6 feet of sea level rise would be a disaster.
It would displace millions, probably at least a few tens of millions of people. Where are they going to go? India's already built a wall between India and Bangladesh. They're anticipating there are going to be a lot of Bangladeshis starting to move, looking for a place to go, and Bangladesh itself is already one of the most densely populated countries on Earth. And then there are another 18 or 20 rice-growing river deltas in Asia, the Irrawaddy in Burma, the Pearl River Delta in China, and so forth, that would be affected in varying degrees by the rise in sea level.
By the end of the century, cities and coastlines around the world will be under siege from the rising tides. Everywhere, people will be building levees and sea defenses to fight back. But sea level rise won't stop at 6 feet. In the next century, sea levels are likely to rise at an even faster rate. As the predicted melt of Greenland and Antarctica accelerates, exposed cities won't have time to build new sea defenses. Clues about the speed of future sea level rise can be found in the planet's past, during the time of the last ice age. As global temperatures rose, the planet's ice sheets melted into the sea. Sea levels rose, first slowly, then at great speed, by a staggering 390 feet, until they settled at today's levels. The question is, how fast did this happen? The answer may help us to predict how quickly sea levels could rise in the next century, and how much time we have to defend our coasts. Professor Rick Mortlock is one of the world's leading experts on past sea level rise. He and his team collect fossilized coral from the seabed. In the lab, they analyze and then compare the exact depth and age of each sample. Soon, a clear picture emerges of how fast sea levels rose thousands of years ago.
We have two pieces of fossil coral that was recovered from drill cores off of Barbados. So by dating these samples and knowing the depth at which they were retrieved, we can use that information to create a point-by-point reconstruction of sea level for the last 20,000 years. There's one particular sea level rise of interest. We call it Meltwater Pulse 1A. During that period of time, we believe sea level rose about 20 meters in 500 years, or about 4 to 5 meters per 100 years.
If the same happened again, it would translate to as much as 16 feet of additional sea level rise in the next century. We need to modify our scenario and factor in even faster rises.
If we don't get emissions under control, the rate of sea level rise will keep accelerating. And so in the next century, it's not only that we get the additional 5 to 7 feet that we got the last century, that's going to happen, but we add on to that. So now we're looking by 2200, probably at least 15 feet above, and probably 20. By 2100, the cities will know that they are doomed. The coastal cities, anyway.
If the oceans rose